Welcome to the Level Up Podcast, presented by The Ultimate Gamer, a show that features conversations with trailblazers, thought leaders, risk takers, decision makers, celebrities, athletes, and investors who are defining the gaming and eSports space. On Level Up, we take a journey into this dynamic industry and start to decode and reveal who and what's making news. It's about connecting, and it's about sharing the stories and vision of the people who make gaming and eSports a global phenomenon. And now, please welcome your host, student of the game, and connector to the eSports community, Tommy Knapp.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tommy Knapp, and this is an all-new episode of the Level Up Podcast presented by The Ultimate Gamer. On today's show, I have a conversation with Herb May, Director of Corporate Partnerships for the Houston Outlaws. He comes from a traditional sports background, working with the NFL's on-location experiences, and spent some time in the world of eSports investments and ETFs before landing his role at the Overwatch franchise. With hats reversed, that's Herbie's trademark look, we dive right into the value of LinkedIn as a networking and content platform to what Herb calls crappy Division III football in the Northeast. I, of course, take exception, and he backpedals a little before we move on to more serious matters. He provides some great advice about networking, mentorship, and being both strategic and aggressive when looking to enter the gaming and esports industry. Then, as he has his cup of coffee, as they like to say, in the frenzied investment space of esports, he lets us know the subtle differences between esports ETFs and how algorithms dictate the blending of stocks. Finally, we explore the ever-evolving landscape of sponsorship and how brands, agencies, and orgs are learning from one another. There's big money, pent-up interest, and a massive global audience here, and Herb is piecing it all together for his partners one deal at a time. Join me now, and make sure your hat is on backwards, for Herb May.
What's up, man?
What's up, man? Long time no see. I miss you.
I know, right? Been all over the place recently.
Fucking tired, man. Gas. I just did the ESI Digital Summit with Slasher. You know, Rod Braslow.
Yeah. So stop right there because we're gonna go. We're going right now. Okay. So I'm just.
Oh,
I'm recording. So yeah, it's all a conversation. So I want you to go ahead and start where you just got off because of your ESI. Just talking around. Yeah, jump right in.
I'll jump right. Yeah, I'm literally walking out of the digital summit, and you know he's such a fabulous guy, but he's like OG. He's been in it forever, and he's got a lot of great thoughts. Some towards my employer, so that are different than mine. So anyway, we only had the two of us, and because Chester King couldn't join, so. Anyway, it was just it was a fun conversation. He's a really nice guy, but he's got some opinionated thoughts about the Overwatch League.
Yeah, man. So that's kind of crazy, right? Because you don't really, if you have a third person there to kind of buffer, it allows you that chance to think. You just got sucked right into whatever conversation you were in.
It was mano y mano, and our moderator Kirsty from Swipe Right PR did a great job. Credit to eSports Insider for putting on a digital summit. Boy, seems like an absolute nightmare dealing with people all over the globe. So anyway, great event, great to be with Rod, and it's hopefully the league doesn't get me in trouble.
Yeah, right. Well, I want you to tell me a little bit more about it because I want to know how you guys how you got invited, what you guys talked about, what their schedule is, because obviously these digital conferences are fantastic for the industry right now. But I did want to point out one thing. I did this in honor of you, bro. I got my hat on backwards and everything.
I was gonna say, I think you did it on purpose, didn't you? You wanted to go back.
I've done like 15 or 20 of these. I have not worn a hat backwards yet, just for you, man.
Oh man, I love it. I'm gonna have to get you some Outlaws swag, dude.
That's right. Send it over. All right, yeah. So kind of jumping back to ESI. So tell me a little bit about that conference and what you see. Obviously, you and I, we met at a conference.
We did.
In person instead of doing Zoom and meeting virtually. What are your thoughts about people pivoting into it because we need it right now? And then what do you feel are maybe the biggest differences? And are you still getting as much out of these events as you would if you were there live?
I think they're fabulous. You know, I like it depends. I mean, I think you have to start being selective. I think there's so many out there that I think, you know, the events industry is so lucrative, and like everyone wants to say they've got a list of, you know, of key experts across every industry and wants to have a lot of value so that you buy into their event. I think you have to create a relationship with an event. In my personal opinion, I think in my first year, as you know, I went to as many things as possible. Like a DreamHack is like a combination of, we first met at DreamHack, didn't we?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It was a combination of kind of fun and interaction plus networking and great stuff like that. ESI was a little more panels, which I love. Like it was great for me to get my start. My first ever ESI was up in New York just last year, I think. Yeah. Wow. In New York City, I flew up from Atlanta because I wanted to be there. It was my first like panel event. I think they're great. I think they really are. And I think this digital format is going to tell us a lot. It's actually, I think, going to tell us a lot more about the company itself, because ESI could easily, you know, put this on, well, you know, multiple times throughout the year, not have to worry about costs and venues and food and things like that. So I'm curious as, you know, to kind of what this does to an events company's P&L, because I think, you know, when you look at the price today based on what it is in a person, it's different. It's a lot more affordable with, you know, arguably some really, really great speakers. So it'll be interesting. It'll say more about the event organizer more than the actual state of the union, what they want to do moving forward.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I'll miss, at least from the couple conferences that I really enjoyed, and I talked to Ryan Johnson last week, is on the DreamHack side, the stuff that Ali and M. Cole and Ryan were working on, eSports Week, you know, that day really before the DreamHack event started, when you got to go and visit the different locations, because that to me was huge. I come from a tourism and travel industry, and they call them site inspections. But when we got a chance to go to Complexity and walk through Complexity, and we get a chance to go to Mavs Gaming and walk through Mavs Gaming and go to Arlington Stadium, you know, all those things are hands-on and they're experiential. So in that sense, I think we'll miss some of that with just the virtual landscape.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think there's nothing that can replace, you know, you and I getting together over a beer and talking about different opportunities, what we're working on, right? So I think that element will certainly never be replaced, and that's one thing that I am missing. But due to the saturation of the market and how many different things are out there, you know, how many people really have an opportunity to become the online platform, right? I see companies out there that are creating virtual networking hangouts, which I think is really, really interesting. So, but again, you and I are in-person type of guys. So while I think this format was great, I think ESI did a really, really fabulous job today dealing with people all over the globe. I think, you know, I'm still looking forward to getting back in person at some point.
Yeah. Is that eFuse? Is that one of those areas that you're talking about that's kind of more of a industry special or specific type of LinkedIn platform?
eFuse, I've gotten to know the eFuse guys well. I'm a huge fan of them, and they like to call themselves a complement, I believe, to LinkedIn, where you can really centralize everything from the content to the type of professional player you are to what you're trying to achieve as a professional. So I think they more describe it as a complement as opposed to a competitor, because there's certainly different aspects to what you can do on that platform. And I don't want to speak on behalf of Matt's company and what he does, but I know that they're creating a really, really unique centralized platform from a professional standpoint, also as a player standpoint, and a content creation standpoint to really create a different type of profile in 2020 than what I've created on LinkedIn. I'm not a content creator. I'm solely, the content I make is strictly about, you know, is professional. Right. So LinkedIn makes more sense for me, but I've tried to do my best to get some more of that stuff onto eFuse and things like that, because I think they do a really cool job.
Tell me a little bit about how you did work into LinkedIn and the social media component of what you're building out as the Herb May brand, if you will. And listen. This is in all seriousness. This is when you go from working, and I want you to talk about your origin story too, and maybe that's a way to work into this, but when you make your own decisions, you're doing your own thing, you're choosing to go whatever direction you're going as an individual, then you can do whatever you want as far as podcasts go, as far as creating content. Once you sign on, like you have with the Houston Outlaws, and you become part of a brand that's representing the Overwatch League, then a lot of times you have to be more careful, and they may say, hey, listen, Herb, you can't do this, or you can do that. So when you first walked into building out your brand and then in joining the LinkedIn team, because I don't know that much about it, so I'd like to learn how you did that, because I use LinkedIn constantly. I mean, you and I are the kind of people that are always on it. So how did you were already using it, but then did they invite you, or did you reach out to them to actually start your own show that you're doing on LinkedIn now?
I had been on LinkedIn since 2014 as just like I just had a profile. And it was always something that at the time was just always used for jobs and job searching, but it certainly wasn't a content platform back then. The reason why I started doing content on it actually was out of frustration. I was angry at the amount of times I was getting passed on to get a job in esports. Okay. So I had been networking in esports about November before the Super Bowl. Got through the Super Bowl, month passed, and they laid a bunch of us off, including me. And so I had been doing a bunch of networking. I was looking for a job anyway. So
what year was this? What year was this, Herbie?
This was after Super Bowl 53. So this was what year is it? 2020? Is that so? Maybe 20. So is that 2018? Yeah, 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then got laid off, and I was actively looking for a new job anyway. But I was still getting a lot of no's because I didn't have that esports experience. So I was like, okay, you know what? I just need to start talking about it. I need to start putting it out there. I need to start making content. And it was really, really hard. It was a hard pill to swallow because I'm comfortable, in person with you, but when you come from like a fraternity life at Ole Miss, you just worry about your buddies ragging on you,
right?
Which they
never stops.
Yeah, exactly. Which they certainly did. But at the end of the day, it started to work. I mean, it started to build some traction, and then LinkedIn Live was coming out, and I applied early. And I think due to the application process, you had to have some video content on your profile if you wanted to be accepted, because I know a ton of people who haven't been accepted still. But I was like, this day it came out, I was like, you know what, bang, apply. And I had no rhyme or reason. I was just, let's just go live. Let's see where it takes us. Let's see what we can build. And that was kind of the point. I was like, the second I try and script this, the second I try and implement a plan, because I think I was going to start thinking about it too much.
Yep.
So I just went and I just figured it out. I just kind of went from there. What I'm talking about is making me smile because it's just like I literally had no plan.
Yeah, well, dude, there's so much something to be said about that, right? Because I know a bunch of people. I mean, we've met so many people, right? You meet a lot of people. The people that typically are successful in lives are people that do it. They try it, and they're like, "Listen, you're not going to learn anything unless you try it, and you're going to make tons of mistakes. And what it is today might not even be close to what it is in 3 months or a year or 2 years." But if you never start, if you just always talk about it, you're analysis paralysis, then nothing's going to happen. So I love the fact that you just threw yourself in. You did have an idea, though. I mean, you weren't talking about the medical field, and you weren't talking about traveling around the world. You were talking about esports and gaming.
Talking about esports and gaming, and especially from someone coming from traditional sports, right? Where traditional sports is, I'm a diehard Baltimore Ravens fan and always will be, right? That's part of my life. But there was something about the NFL that was kind of, as a 26-year-old, that was lacking a little bit of innovation. The game is never going to change, nor do I want it to. It's my favorite game ever. But the thing about esports is the continuous evolution and the continuous changes. What we're seeing right now, Valorant enters the scene. Warzone enters the scene. It's just going to consistently change, and it's more to me. I mean, there's going to be guys selling tickets to the Super Bowl for their entire career, and they're going to love it. And I did it for a great time, and it really taught me how to sell. But I really wanted to be taken out of my comfort zone and to be put in uncomfortable positions, which esports does to you. It's just like things change in a minute, and it's fun. It keeps you up at night, but it's fun.
Yeah, man. And I think the other thing also is it's still in that very, very nascent stage. It's still very new, right? So if you and I jumped into the NFL 75, 80 years ago, 90, 100 years ago, or any of the other big leagues, right, you would have probably had a lot of opportunity, and the game changed a lot. I mean, the game has changed quite a bit. I mean, look at, it's so funny. If I show my kids, even from the 60s and 70s, but if you show them something from the 30s and 40s when they wore leather helmets, and it's crazy. And they were tripping.
Even when I'm going to show my kids like the early Ray Lewis highlights in life, and they're going to be like, how come nobody hits like that anymore? I was like, because you can't.
Right. Yeah. I tell them all that all the time, man. We'll watch a hit. And back when I was playing, it was like you just light somebody up, and then we called it a green shirt at Ithaca where I played. And so you actually wore that the whole week of practice the next week because you lit somebody up. And now when you light somebody up, I mean, you may be getting penalized depending on the shot, So it is crazy, but yeah, that's why this industry, esports and gaming, is so interesting, exciting because of where it is right now and the difference that we can make and what's going on. So I love that you did that with LinkedIn. So kind of walk us back a little bit through that. You mentioned Ole Miss. You mentioned you think you're from Baltimore. You're a Ravens fan, so I don't know if you're from Baltimore, but
born and raised.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that, and then how you kind of walked into the Super Bowl job, Round Hill, and then we'll kind of talk more about Houston Outlaws and where we are today.
Sure. So I mean, there was always a small dream that I could play at one point, keep playing football. I was a pretty average defensive end, tight end in high school, and went down. I had a choice to either go work or to go play crappy D3 up in the Northeast. So I went down to Ole Miss, and after my first internship was actually the summer before graduating with the Baltimore Ravens, like I wanted to go on the scouting train. So I went and worked for Hugh Freeze and the Ole Miss Rebels in their first season, which was, one of the greater recruiting classes ever, which we eventually got in trouble for. So we won't talk about that. Right. But, at that point I was sports through and through. I was like, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do, whether it's scouting or recruiting. This is what I want to be in. And then things kind of started to shift. I kind of got a bad taste in my mouth after college football a little bit. Started to get some exposure to sponsorship. I went to work for Wells Fargo for a summer where I worked in sports marketing and sponsorships for them, which was really cool because that was the summer of the World Cup, and they were one of the biggest sponsors of the Mexico national team. So it was an awesome summer for me. And then was getting ready to graduate, and NFL On Location had just been sold from the NFL to a private equity firm called Redbird Capital. One of the principals at Redbird Capital was a Sigma Nu at Ole Miss. So I saw it, I saw the news. I was like, listen, the company that you just acquired, I think is perfect for me. Just get me an interview. I just let me walk in the door. I'll take it from there. Which is what I did. And I did, and I'm one of my mottos is be perfectly persistent. So whether it's writing you a message on LinkedIn to whether it's writing, somebody at the NFL or writing Joanna Ferris, I kind of don't really stop until you tell me to stop. And that's kind of what I believe what it takes to get jobs, because quite honestly, my academic career is not impressive. I never really liked school. I wasn't very focused at school. I just wanted to work. I liked the thought of being in the real world more than going to accounting. Right when I graduated I didn't get an answer from the NFL for a long time. I started applying about 4 months before I graduated and staying on top of the guys who's running the organization, who's Chris Giles, who eventually ended up going on to the Oakland Athletics. But I pried at him for weeks on end. Packed up my car at Mississippi with some of my stuff to drive to Florida. Ended up having to drive back to Mississippi about a week or so later to pack up the rest. And so it was a ton of driving. It was a nightmare. I did it the wrong way. But I'll never forget the call. I got a call on the way back from Chris Giles. He's like, where are you? I was like, I'm driving back to Mississippi right now from Florida to pack up my apartment. He's like, can you be in Dallas by Monday? And I was like, sure, man, whatever you want, whatever gets me this job. So instead of going back to Florida, rerouted to Dallas, and lived out of my friend's parents' house for 4 weeks, because it was only a 6-week contract job. And then they sent me to Houston for 2 weeks, for Super Bowl 51. And I lived out of a hotel in a day bag for 2 weeks, showed that I was willing to be as aggressive of a grunt as I possibly could be. And they ended up, after Super Bowl 51, they gave me a job and moved me up to New York City.
Well, one of the things you said right at the beginning was you talking about persistence, but the one thing that a lot of people don't have the natural gift for, I don't think, is that you knew that you kind of wanted into the space and you looked for a way in. And so then you had the Ole Miss connection. And that's a big thing that I try to tell people. It's like, listen, don't just throw your resume into a pile with 1,000 other resumes. Yeah.
One of the interesting things, and as you know, just as I know how good you are at networking, and just you always know something personal about something or about someone, something that's going on, whether it be from a business perspective, from a personal standpoint, and it's just like it makes somebody else on the other side of the table know that you're paying attention. So I like to give out, certain insider tips when I'm doing on LinkedIn or something like that. Like if you come to me with some sort of Ravens comment, like I know I will answer you. Like that is just the key in, and nobody ever does it ever. Right. So like, if you just like write me that generic message of like, hey, I'd love to pick your brain and here's my resume. Like it just doesn't, like show me There's little
no connection. Yeah.
Exactly. Like I like go into the person, I look at their resume, I do a Google search, I figure out something just so I have that one extra line where it just like, even if it doesn't get a response, it at least will stand off the page a little more than I know the next guy who wrote that copy and pasted message 1,000 times.
Yeah, 100%. But this has been going in my mind just since you said it, like about 5 minutes ago. And you probably don't know this, or you don't know the way you said it, but you said you had a chance as a tight end or a defensive end to go up and play in crappy Division III football up in the Northeast. And that's where I'm from. That's what I played, bro. I played at Ithaca College, man.
Dude, it was Hobart or Bates, Colby or Trinity. So we would have been going at it. Listen, I got a lot of respect for the Ithaca boys. The Ithaca boys ran hard.
We played, I think our junior year when we won the national championship, we beat Hobart 63-0. So if you're talking about Hobart back then, they weren't the best. So I could understand where you're coming from.
You know what? You're right. I shouldn't have said crappy. That was rude. My mom went to Hobart, so hopefully she watches everything I do. She'll be like, "Hey, man, what the hell?"
It's a really pretty campus too. Geneva's it's pretty
Geneva,
up there.
right? Right in Lake Geneva. I hear it gets cold up there, but like my mom was like, dude, please don't make me go watch you play 4 more years in the freezing cold.
That's funny. All right. So okay, you got into the NFL and you were working there. And then I know you made a transition. You were looking at that point. You were after a little while, right?
I was looking before I started with the NFL. So I graduated. I had gotten through my 6-week internship. I had come up to New York because I didn't have anywhere to live. So I was staying with my parents because they lived right in the Upper East Side. And we were waiting to hear if NFL on location was going to hire me. They were their own subset of the NFL. They were a separate entity, but they handled all the hospitality for the league. So I was waiting on an answer. At that point, I was doing a bunch of other networking. I was talking to a lot of other people because I needed a plan in case it didn't go well. I mean, I assumed I was just going to stay in New York. So I went and talked to one of my great mentors in life and great friends and a great family friend who has done very, very well with the hedge fund that he runs and was a very early, and he was a huge fan of NVIDIA early on. So I remember I'll never forget the day he sat across the table from me. He's like, you need to pay attention to esports. And this was back 2016. And coming from a man who's done so well in life as he has, and somebody who's also, I mean, he's like, I don't know, he's an older guy. He's like, you need to pay attention. I was like, okay, you're kind of a crazy person. I've always played video games my whole life, never competitively or anything serious, just a bunch of Call of Duty and Madden, and I never thought of anything of it as a career. But I'll just never forget the breakfast we had, and I was like, you're worth a lot more than me, and I hope to be worth as much as you one day. So I'm gonna go ahead and take your word for it. And so I had started learning right when I started with the NFL. So that's when I started kind of looking at articles and things like that. I wasn't thinking about it at that time. Like my first year at the NFL, I was dedicated, but then selling was getting repetitive. I was like, okay, let me just see where else I can apply these skills. And esports was like the first thing I thought of.
Yeah, and who were some of the big names? Did you see some big names? I mean, you're working in the NFL. Did you start to see some big money investment coming from specific people? Or, like for me, I was very similar to you in the sense where I heard Zach Leonsis, Ted Leonsis, on a Paul Rabel podcast. Then I started seeing the money that Robert Kraft and Jerry Jones and the Cronkies and, all of these people that are owning professional sports teams that are billion-dollar machines. They're not even $20 million to get an Overwatch franchise. But when I started to see that, I was like, this is smart people that have done a great job of building these traditional sports leagues. And that's when I started saying, I got to really pay attention. And then I started reading stuff and getting very excited.
Yeah. And that's kind of like that. Once those news articles started to come out, I had known, I'd been looking much, much sooner than when those leagues started to become established and the rumors started to come out. Right. So I'd probably say, it was probably about a year before that time where I had heard whispers and I started networking in the space, meeting more and more people. And then those investments started to come in, those names started to get dropped. And at that point, I'm like, okay, something's going to go on here. And that's when I got really, really fidgety on LinkedIn, really, really just detailed about who I was connecting with, because I had gotten wafts of who would be buying the teams, what the plan was. And so I was early to the table. My thought process with LinkedIn is that, like, don't go looking for jobs that have open, or companies that have openings. Go look for companies that you want to work for and be the person that fills the opening before they have to put it out there. Recruiting is such a nightmare of a process, filling a role. No one wants to do it. If you can go be the guy that fills a gap when that opens up, like, you'll save not just the company money, but just, overall, like, pulling out hair.
Yeah. And that still exists.
That's how I met Jeremy Poor.
Okay. Yeah. And that really still exists right now, because everything is still building out, and you have new leagues and you have teams and orgs that are, and I use this all the time. This example, when I met Ben Spoon from Misfits Gaming, it was him. He was the CEO of the team. He had teams, planted all over the world. One over in Germany. And, but when I looked at his org chart, it was just him. And I knew in the course of the next 2 to 3 years, which is happening now, they were going to need to fill 30 to 35 spots, which he's doing at this point. Yep. So to your point, if you're like, well, I'm really good at, I'm great sponsorship, and they don't have anybody even in sponsorship yet, you basically just have to tell them, listen, you guys need this position and I'm the person to fill it. And then again, it's one resume, one direct connection, instead of just being thrown out there once they post it with 1,000 other people.
And that's what I did. One of the early guys I talked to too was Justin Stefanovich. He was a great friend to me and still is, and gave me a lot of advice that day. I knew there was jobs coming, but he didn't have anything open. And I basically, what I did is I put myself into 3 buckets of my skill set. I'm very open and honest about what I'm good and what I'm not good at. And I was like, listen, these are the 3 things that I really think I excel at. And these where I'm hoping you can apply them to your business at some point if a role opens up. If not, I want to just be a resource. I'll do whatever, like, make it free. I don't care. And that's kind of what I did that. I still got the sheet, and I think it's 175 people on it of just people that I picked out of LinkedIn, and I have all their names, their roles, their contact information, and the conversation that we had. And I can never release it because some of them weren't great, and so they're all labeled red, yellow, and green, just like people I can call back, people I had terrible conversation with. Didn't always go so well. Some OG esports guys worked me off the phone and they were like, dude, no way. Boom. Right. But that was just kind of part, it's like networking and selling combined together. So
dude, to me, and that's the process and that's the journey. And the thing that's always crazy is it's timing, right? Because some of those guys that are in the red today, if you caught them at the right time, they could be in the green. It just might have been the wrong time. Who knows what they're at?
100%. And I feel it on my end too. So I don't know who it was last week, just caught me at a bad time.
Yeah.
And I will say, you need to be strategic about the conversations that you're having, right? You need to act like you care about the other person on the phone before you just start asking for stuff. That just is rude. Yep. But I know I was caught in a bad time last week, and anyway, the conversation was just short. But at the end of the day, when you're on the other side of it, I always try and pay it forward, and I always try and be patient as possible. But it's I get it. I get it now on this side where it's in esports, we don't have a ton of time. It's not just 9 to 5, gamers are night owls, and there's always stuff going on. And then, quite honestly, there's a great time to catch people at night, like on Discord or on Twitter or on stream, like, hey, I want to set up a conversation. You got to get creative. So, if you're setting up networking calls, be strategic.
Yeah. So now talk to us about Round Hill. So that was next, correct? Or was there something in between that and Round Hill?
Well, I was at 404 eSports, which is I basically just called Greg and I was like, let me just help you with something so I can get it on my resume and do it for free. And he was thrilled. And he still will always be one of my good allies in the industry because of what he did for me. And then I went to Access Replay, where I was for 3 months, and then Round Hill, and I had been communicating, but I talked to Round Hill for the first time before Access Replay. And they were just good dudes. They were Vanderbilt guys I wanted to connect with. I knew nothing about ETFs, but I loved kind of what they represented in regards to giving an investment opportunity for the general public to invest in esports. And conversations just kind of kept going. They loved my LinkedIn stuff. They loved that content. And the notion in hiring me was that whatever I was doing on LinkedIn, they wanted me to do it for them. Okay. As well as business development and other marketing things. And it was really a test. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a test. Like, they didn't have like a projection that they had put out for me, but we did some really cool stuff, and we kind of tried to rebuild what the ETF market looks like for esports in particular, because we had another competitor out there. But Tim and Will are two of my all-time favorite people ever, and it was a really fun, small stint that I had in my career.
So dive into that a little bit if you can. Just explain the ETF and the esports side of things for people.
Yeah, so ETF from a basic standpoint is a basket of stocks pertaining to a particular industry that allows anyone to take part in something with maybe not having to spend as much money as you ideally want to. So we had holdings of about 25 different companies that, based on an algorithm, we thought pertain to esports in particular. So whether it be streaming, whether it be the publishers, whether it be infrastructure, there were 25 different companies, Activision, Logitech, Douyu, Hoya, just to name a few, applied to our algorithm. And so it was weighted a particular way, so that if you went on to the New York Stock Exchange and you bought a share of NERD, which was our ticker, for whatever, I don't know what it's trading at today, but let's say it was $15, then essentially you get access to all 25 of those companies. When, I own a bunch of Activision, and that stock's up to $75 today. So you essentially get micro shares of Activision by being a part of NERD, instead of going to spend $75 on just Activision as a whole. And so we wanted to bring that product to the investing public to be like, listen, if you don't know what you're doing, you don't want to do the homework, but this esports thing is big and you want to be a part of it, here is a representation of the industry.
Yeah. And I mean, how is that doing today? I mean, you find
it's good. There's another competitor out there. ETFs are all kind of based off of, like, I think a little bit of first mover. So Van Eck is the big ETF issuer and one of the big ones. And they have one called ESPO. I get frustrated with Van Eck because they spell esports and all their stuff with a capital S. And so, but they put a product out there, and their product is a little different. We thought ours was based on our algorithm, we had a pure play esports ETF. So they had NVIDIA and Nintendo and things like that. And those two companies didn't actually apply to our algorithm being esports companies. Okay. NVIDIA, is just, it's a graphics card, right? It's a semiconductor that doesn't, put out games or host tournaments or things like that. And then Nintendo like openly doesn't support the esports scene. I think they're working on it obviously now, but at that time, they just put out the games. The grassroots tournaments had nothing to do with Nintendo. So it just didn't apply to our algorithm.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting when you talk about the esports, the way it's spelled, and then when we talk about esports versus gaming, or gaming and esports. One of the guys in Ultimate Gamer just sent over, probably 2 hours ago, something about esports, and again, it's been ongoing, right? I saw something from the Associated Press, I think it was a year ago, that said, listen, it's either capital E sports, which is like at the beginning of a sentence, or it's lowercase e, lowercase sports, no dash,
that's how you should be writing it. And so he just sent that over on WhatsApp a little while ago, and I sent a quick message back to him and mentioned that AP article. The one that gets me, and I still think, capital S, when you put the capital S in there, is to the endemics is going to really drive them nuts, right? Mm-hmm. Just like you said, it kind of drives them crazy. But the worst one is, to me anyways, e-gaming. And it wasn't me when I first started, but it was me sharing information that I got from other people, and me sharing stuff that said e-gaming in it, and me not catching it. So I would forward it to you, and I had like at least 3 or 4 people when I did that, and they didn't respond to me. So then I was like, and they're friends, I'd be like, and I sent a message back, I'm like, listen, why didn't you respond? They're like, listen, I'm not even going to respond to this deck that you sent over. They put e-gaming on the title page. It's not e-gaming.
It's silly. From an esports perspective, I think it's silly, but at the end of the day, like if you want to be a company that lasts and your market is endemic, gamers, they will call you out. So while it seems so silly, and while I'll never forget the day Chad DeLuca, who runs partnership or sponsorships for Twitch, called me out and told me, because I had written a thing about it on LinkedIn and I capitalized S all over the place, and I didn't realize how much it matters. And there was one point where I was like, okay, whatever, Chad, it doesn't matter. Right. And I always tell him every time I see him how grateful I am that he told me, because it just does. And I know people get frustrated when I tell them, and they can get as frustrated as they want, but it just matters. It just does. It's just one of those things that does. And e-gaming is how you really, really can tell, because that's just doesn't make sense, right? Just when you actually think about it. So anyway, that's listen, it's just part of the deal. It just matters. I remember when I learned my lesson.
Yeah, man. All right, so cool. So Roundhill, so you had, obviously that was a pretty good experience, right?
Fabulous, really was. And there were certainly people that asked, since it was so short, how it ended or why it ended, and I wanted to be on the team side of things, and it was the hardest career move I had to make, and I haven't had a very long career, but it was nothing to do with Roundhill, Tim, or Will, and I think they're fabulous entrepreneurs, and they're about to do some really, really cool stuff, some huge announcements coming out of them, and honestly, it has me jealous sometimes, but I knew based on the way I listened to them on phone calls and the way I listened to myself, and I kind of felt my excitement. They were more excited about what we were talking about than I was. And it would have been irresponsible for me to stay on in a startup mode like that, based on how excited I was. Right. So it was tough to go. But the Beasley Media Group and the Outlaws presented a really, really great opportunity, which made it easier to jump. But it was a really, really fabulous 5 months. I can't stress that enough. And those guys are fantastic entrepreneurs and are going to do awesome stuff.
Very cool. So now you're with the Outlaws. So now you land there. How long have you been with Houston?
Since February is when I started. So okay. Moved to Houston. Got quarantined, making great friends with my kitchen counter and my refrigerator. So it's good. It's been fun.
So what's your role specifically with them? And talk a little bit just about the Houston Outlaws and when they started, the league they're in, because there may be people listening that don't even know who Houston Outlaws are.
Sure. The Houston Outlaw, I am the director of corporate partnerships for the Houston Outlaws. The Houston Outlaws were an original 12 of the Overwatch League. So we're a part of its infancy in season 1 3 years ago. Initially, it was owned by Optic or Infinite in the Infinite Gaming deal. And then last year, Optic was sold to Immortals. And the Houston slot came available for purchase. Beasley Media Group, who is now the ownership group, who had a minority ownership in the Detroit Renegades and also another content platform called Checkpoint XP, decided this is what they wanted to invest in their next esports investment. So they took over the Houston Outlaws, and we have been building up a strong organization from the front office to the players that we have, and it's been a really, really fun ride. I love being on the team side of things. I think it's a really, really cool part of this industry, And I'm really, really fortunate to be a part of such a great team.
So tell me a little bit, because a lot of orgs, and I want to know, because I honestly don't know this question. So there's a lot of orgs out there that represent multiple teams, right? So like here in my backyard, Misfits Gaming, they've got the what is it? They've got the Florida Mayhem, they've got the Florida Mutineers, and then they've got Misfits Gaming. So there's a number, and they have a team in each one of the franchise leagues: Overwatch, League of Legends, Call of Duty. With the Outlaws, are you just representing the Houston Outlaws? Is it one team? And then if you're just representing one team, as far as sponsorship goes, does it make it easier or harder? Because an org has multiple teams typically to sell for.
Yeah, sure. So from, a reach standpoint, we are very centralized Houston, right? And, with the reach with the Renegades, and Renegades we're a minority ownership. So, I don't personally interact with the Renegades. They have their own organization up there that I believe out of Detroit, that they handle their own sponsorships. So we are very focused on the Houston market and the game of Overwatch. I was excited to join this organization and join this team because of the umbrella of Beasley eSports and the plans for the future. So I know there's been some really, really aggressive plans for the future in regards to esports. I'm not going to sit here and say we're buying a Valorant team or something like that. I don't know what the plans are, but I know that esports is a part of what I was excited about coming down here for. Obviously, like Lori Burgess joined as the COO. She sold me on joining this organization based on plans for the future, and I was thrilled to do so. I don't want to say it makes it necessarily more difficult. It might make the reach much more finite, right? So our key markets are Austin, Houston, and San Antonio. So that's where I spend a majority of my time, but I certainly go much, much broader outside of that. But when it comes to working with a franchise city-based team, I want to make sure that companies that are located here first are given my full attention, at least for the first probably year or so.
Yeah. And how's your outreach been, and what kind of new partners and sponsors have you guys inked in the last 6 months to a year?
It's been great. So right when I started, we had a couple of deals in motion with Zaxby's, which is based out of Atlanta, which I was body built by Zaxby's in college. So I was a huge fan of that partnership. Zenny Gaming, which is the gaming element of Zenny Optical, which did 3 separate deals, one with us, another with the Golden Warriors, and then another with the Pittsburgh Knights. Who Matt Roche, don't you? You might have run into him at an event.
Okay.
He does business development for the Knights. So they did a great partnership across 3 teams as they entered into the esports and gaming space. And then my first deal was with Samsung. So Samsung Samsung took part in what we had built as the Lone Star Challenge, which is for any non-gamers out there, it's a little bit like a Hard Knocks in a way of what we built on a traditional TV broadcast / streaming as well. They came in as the title sponsor of that, and then are going to be joining us as a partner of the team as well. So we've been really active since me coming down here, and will continue to be. So it's been a lot of fun. Yeah,
man. So I was going to ask you about the assets and what you think is the most valuable asset that you guys have, or the combination of them for a sponsor and the reach that they're trying to get out there. But based on the fact that you said the Lone Star Challenge, I was going to ask you that question about the Lone Star Challenge. That sounds pretty cool. And I was thinking of Houston Outlaws as being a team that's playing in Overwatch, but it sounds like you're also doing some of that content and creating some content on the side, both for the team and maybe to build that narrative around the team, as well as to have an outlet for your partners and sponsors to reach.
Yeah, and a huge credit goes to our COO, Lori Burgess, who runs Beasley eSports, and also kind of has taken on the presidential role of the Outlaws. And really, I like to say I like to work for good people more than I want to work for an organization. And I had immediately kind of fallen head over heels for working for her, and her creativity and what she's done in creating what was the Lone Star Challenge, and the way we worked with Dallas to do it, I think says, as you know about me, I'm more err on the side of collaborate, don't compete. And the way we did that, and the ability to create a really, really unique asset that, based on the YouTube numbers and the streaming numbers and broadcast numbers that we'll put out eventually, blew the doors off. I mean, it really, really created a unique experience outside of just the league that allowed our fans to engage and be a part of something new that kind of really hadn't been done before. And I always err on the side of, I want to know what my players are doing outside of just practicing and playing. I want to know about them. I want to know their backstory. I want to know, if they've had challenging times in their life, what they've learned from. And the docu-series that we created, that's now on YouTube, if you want to go watch it, really tells some amazing stories about our players, and it really introduces you to the Houston Outlaws and the Dallas Fuel. And when you talk about new things that we can create for our sponsors, storytelling, I think is really important part of that. And the Lone Star Challenge, I think, is going to be a model that a lot of people start to kind of copy.
Yeah, no, I mean, it sounds like one of the ways to go. And I think that was one of the things esports was missing 2, 3, 4 years ago, right? There really weren't that many stories. And everybody was saying, it's just somebody that's behind a screen and playing on a screen. So you're not a lot of times even really watching them like you are a traditional sports athlete. You're really watching what they're doing, in the game itself. So what you guys are doing, I think, is really important for the industry. And you're seeing a lot more people go that way. So do you think you guys will do other shows like that? And is that an ongoing show, or is it shot once a week?
So we'll have a trophy that will get built out, and it'll be passed back and forth city to city and year to year. It'll be something we want to bring more sponsors and more local brands into, but we'll probably do it once a year. I don't know what the timing will be like. We'll probably do it once a year. So, it took a lot of work. Listen, these teams all run very lean and have a lot of people doing a lot of different things. We're so lucky to work with Banner. That's basically our marketing arm out of Chicago that does really, really amazing stuff for us. And then eSports Engine we work with as well, who we couldn't have done. We barely do anything without. They're such a great team to work with. I shouldn't say it like that, but they're great. They really are a fabulous team, and the way this team worked over the last 2 months, and more than that, is a huge testament to leadership and wanting to create something. I tell you all this because I don't think we're going to do anything to this scale anytime soon. Again, right. It took a lot of steam. It just took a lot of work. People were up working really hard, really late. Ideally, we'd like to, right? As these build, we are able to build our organizations and have more assets and more people to work with. I'm sure we could, but this was a good thing to not only give our fans from a content perspective, but we also lost our homestand at the end of the year as well. So being able to create this is pretty cool.
So where do you think brands are as far as different categories right now? What do you think's hot in the space? Because you're obviously, is it the auto industry? Is it insurance? Who's really throwing money? And do you still find, Herbie, that you've got to continue to educate these executives that are making these decisions and these agencies the same way that you needed to maybe even just a year or two ago? Or are people starting to really understand and grasp what esports is?
It's a really good question. I wish that there was a science that told me, which brands and which categories are really jumping in and taking a leap. And sure, you can go and take stock of who actually has the most companies that are involved in esports right now, but I don't think that stat means anything. I think it's got to be the right scenario, the right time. Financially, it has to make sense. Everyone's core values have to be aligned. From a content perspective, everyone has to be on the same page. And at the end of the day, like you said, it has to. Someone has on the other end of the phone has to be educated. I will say that I don't want to say that people certainly know that it's out there, that this is an opportunity. There is something that needs to be educated on. I think what you're seeing more of now is instead of hearing what is esports, it's more, oh yeah, I know about esports. I'd love to learn more. So it's like people know of it from a very, very surface level, which is super helpful because it at least gets the conversation going. Everyone wants to talk about it. But then you certainly have to kind of dive in, ask some questions, answer some detailed questions, which is what I like to do. I love to educate. I'd much rather have somebody who knows it from a top level so I can control the narrative myself when I'm trying to sell. So to answer your question, I think it's, as time goes on, everyone's going to be in a better place. And if you're a smart, innovative marketer, you know that this is something that you need to tackle. And the brands that have gotten involved, I think, are making a very smart decision. And that's one thing that I try and talk about a lot, because being able to know how to pivot and bounce around and navigate esports in 2025 is going to be invaluable. There's just like 2020, it's just everyone's still learning a lot, but the way you and I both know this industry is going to grow, being able to be agile and pivot from game to game, learn how to communicate with teams, learn how they all work. That's knowledge that's really, really going to be invaluable in 2025. So not only do I see the value of esports being, incredibly lucrative at the moment, it's so good, but it's also just an education that you have to have. You just have to have it. This fact, when you lose all sports, that's what's been left during this entire thing. It's just esports. So, if you're not a brand that didn't know how to handle that, you're kind of probably sitting on the outside being like, crap, I really wish we had known how to probably take this on. And we were lucky and we were fortunate to have a bunch of brands that did.
Yeah, and I think you made a good point. I mean, being agile and being able to pivot. I mean, Corona has been the perfect example of that. I mean, all of a sudden our world all just changed. And there are some companies that have gone out there and done a really, really good job of it. And others that are probably finally ready to make that, pull the trigger or make that move now. And now it's starting to return. I don't know when it's going to return to normal, if it'll ever be like what it was, right? But maybe they lost a little bit of that edge, that opportunity, because they weren't ready to pivot and be agile. It's sometimes, you use that example of being in like a speedboat or being in a cruise ship. You see it, but you can't make the turn because it just takes you too long. So talk a little bit just about the Overwatch League, its health right now, where it's going. I know I'm not Rod Slash or Breslow, so I'm not gonna. I really just want to know right now, based on what's happened recently, again with Corona and COVID, and you guys having to pivot to online, and it was a big deal for you guys because I know it was a franchise league. That this year was the year everybody was going to start hosting their home matches, and you're really talking about localizing your fan base, even though you have a global fan base. Really, tying into that city, that passion for the team and the brand locally. So you kind of came in February, and all of it. I mean, your head must have been spinning because you jumped in, you're just learning, and then all of a sudden, boom, yeah.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't a part of the job description. But listen, a huge credit goes to the Overwatch League and the way they pivoted, because there's no one had a script for this, right? No one knew how to handle this. I still think people are still trying to figure it out. But this was this is an audience that was native to what the alternative was. And it goes back to what we knew, which was watching online and watching on YouTube, watching on Twitch. So the league was ready. And they put an action plan into place, and they've been doing a great job. And the way they've been creating different content and different ways for fans to engage, like the tournament we're in now, the fans went crazy over the other day. So listen, as the Overwatch League as a whole, it's still 3 years in, so I see it as a startup, and it's an expensive startup. It just is. So you look at all the news and the drama and everything that comes out on Twitter. It's just all, I see it as pretty irrelevant. I mean, no one really sees what happens behind the scenes and how hard everyone's working, and everyone's dealing with the same challenges. I think there's a lot of good to be taken away with, and if there's been anything bad, it's just another bump in the road in a startup. I think the Overwatch League, I'm really excited for the new game to come out and new updates to come out. I'm excited about the future of the league. I know there's another game out there that's, people are retiring to go play. Transparently, that's not my favorite move. I don't totally understand leaving to go do something else that doesn't have a pro scene. I think players might know something that we don't. But just from a leadership standpoint, which is important to me, I can't imagine considering anyone's return if something else didn't go well. If you left me in the middle of my season to go do something else that maybe doesn't end up working out for you, it's going to be really hard to get back into my doors.
Right.
So that certainly was a bummer. I don't think it speaks much towards the Overwatch League.
Well, talking about the Overwatch League. Give me an idea of when your games are, and where you can absorb that content or digest that content. Now, where can I consume this stuff?
Yeah, well, now after the league struck a massive deal with YouTube for the broadcast rights, YouTube is kind of where you can watch all of it. We typically had pretty set schedules that would go out like on Thursday or Friday, so you could get ready for the weekend. It's a little different now with an online format. I think an official schedule will get released after this tournament about what the actual rest of the season looks like. It's been a little bit from the hip.
Okay.
For where to go now. But yeah, I mean, following on socials and the Overwatch League on all socials, they do a really good job. Once the schedule's up, they put it up. If I told you who I knew we were playing this weekend, I'd be lying to you.
Right. But it's funny, man. It's I talked to somebody about this. I can't remember. So I think it was it might have been Victoria Horsley, because she was talking about the Unified Collegiate Esports Association, and we're just talking about scheduling. And that's one of the things, right? With scheduling, when you look at whether it's the NFL or the NCAA college football season or basketball, like the schedule is released 3, 4, 6 months before the season starts. And so you go in and there still can be a little bit of movement, right? Based on like a team's playing well in the NFL, for instance, and maybe they get moved to like a Sunday primetime, slot instead of whatever slot they were in. So there can still be a little bit of that movement, but there's not a ton. I still find, to me anyway, in esports, in the gaming industry, sometimes I go into the weekend going, I'd really like to watch something in esports this weekend, right? Whether it's Overwatch or League or like a Fortnite tournament. And it's still, to me, challenging. I think Twitch, I think I was talking about this. I think Twitch just put out a new directory, but it's a little bit of a challenge still, right? Because, and the other thing is in the college world, what she was talking about is, if I'm a student, like you went to Ole Miss, I went to Ithaca, you're a college player, like you don't know what your schedule is until the week before or two. Sometimes it's difficult to work around your schedule as far as what your schooling goes and your studies. So like you mentioned, you guys are still, and I know it's different because it's right now we're in the middle of Corona, so there's a lot of changes, but if you're looking ahead to next year, let's say, and we kind of get through Corona and it returns to some state of normalcy, and you guys are playing in an arena locally, do you see this getting better where the schedules will be leased further out so there's more time for people to plan and prepare?
Yeah, our schedule is out. It was totally out, but then we had a massive delay in regards to, and then, I don't really know how the scheduling works. Cause like we went on we played for 6 straight games, and then we went on a 4-week break. So I don't really know how the scheduling particularly works from a league standpoint, but due to the current scenario, like the total schedule, the schedule had just been entirely thrown out. So I'm sure you can go find like the schedule that we have in place, but we haven't been playing by it at all. So this is just like a due to the time. Now, to your point, I think like the schedule release is something that like you can tell a story about, right? I think like the way you just saw the NFL do it was really, really cool. I think we'll get back to basics, and it'll go back to normal once we get to next season.
Yeah, cool. So what else is on the calendar for you guys in the upcoming year? You said something about a tournament. When's the season end?
There's a 3-week tournament the league is put on right now that a couple of people, I think 10 teams qualified for. We did. And then I think the season is set to end probably the start of September. And our plan is just to keep winning. We lost to Dallas last Friday, but we had beaten Vancouver the week before. So we got some wins we certainly need to get, but we're excited about what this team's been able to accomplish this year. And, just want to be the best team Texas has to offer.
Yeah, man. How's your fan engagement, and are you any good at the game yourself?
Our fan engagement is really good. I will tell you that. It's actually really impressive. I didn't realize it until I started working for this team. Our fans are crazy. So that's been great. Then from a player standpoint, You never want to see me play Overwatch ever. It's embarrassing. It's humiliating, and I think I'd get exposed in the scene. However, it was one game. It was the game that I did play at Access Replay a lot whenever I had some downtime. I was pretty terrible at it. 76, Soldier 76 was my guy. That's who I always play with. I always come in and I'd bust some things up, and I'd make other players really mad. But I'm much better at selling the team than I am playing the game.
That's funny. That's funny. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about yet that you wanted to talk about? I got one question for you at the end, but I just want to see if there's anything I missed.
I don't think so. Keep asking questions about esports. Keep networking. There's going to be a lot of opportunities as this space continues to grow.
Yeah, man. So the last thing I want to ask you, and a lot of times I talk about how, people, again, holistically, the rest of recovery, their diet, nutrition, all these different things that they have in their normal daily routine, what they read, how they consume, whether that's esports or whether it's, personal, becoming a better person and just learning more about themselves, philosophically speaking. So when you look, the way I try to break that down is just tell me what your day looks like. Like if you look at today, or yesterday wasn't a good day because it was Memorial Day, so it was a little bit off. But like, what does today look like, or what does your normal Monday or Tuesday look like? Because that'll tell us a little bit about the successful routines and habits that you've built up in your life that have put you where you are today. Don't tell me you're out drinking until 4 a.m. and you got up at like 7 or something.
Some people will tell you the way I work is pretty unhealthy, but my day starts at 4:30. Up, and I do the social media rundown. I do, some LinkedIn answering, some stuff. And then I'm at the gym by, at least 5:30.
Okay. But you got no gyms that are open right now. So what have you been doing
for
the last 2 months?
We're open down here. So we're back in action.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But either way, I was still working out. So whether it was gym or workout, I got to get it in first.
Right.
And then, I try to have my calls mostly in the mornings. So I try to have most of my meetings as I'm a little more fresh, a little more energetic. And then typically the second half of the day is meant for prospecting and setting up more meetings. And it's simple, but sometimes you got to be strategic, but you got to put out as much outreach as humanly possible. And as a one-man show, you got to commit a lot of hours to it. So that's connecting with as many people as possible, making different connections. I know this person. I know this person. We should chat. Connecting for other people as well. There's certainly people that, want introductions, and that becomes a token that you can then use later on. So always remember the tokens that you have to use back from people. So, listen, my goal every day is how can I bring in sponsorship and partnership revenue to this organization? And it's not the most fancy of days, but and it's certainly a lot of grind. But when you come from selling tickets, you learn how to grind pretty hard, as you know.
Yeah.
I love it, and I get excited to wake up every day.
Yeah, man. Seems like you're enjoying it. Thank you. It's good to catch up a little bit. I definitely want to get together, whether you're down here or I'm over there at some point, once this all goes through, and we'll spend some time having a beer.
Absolutely, my man. It's great to see you. I'm glad you're doing well. And we'll catch up soon.
All right, Herbie. Thanks, man. I'll talk to you later.
All right, brother. Talk soon.
Ciao.
I'd like to thank Herb for sharing his time, experience, and knowledge with us today. We covered a ton, and his persistent practice, enthusiasm for the industry, and strategic networking were all inspiring. So you can listen again, but you can also find timestamp segments of the show, links to Herb's social pages, and more information about his company, projects, and media in the show notes. If you enjoyed our discussion, please let us know. Continue the conversation with me across all social platforms and become a part of the Ultimate Gamer community today by subscribing at ultimategamer.com. We release 2 shows a week on Tuesday and Thursday, so be the first to join us for some outstanding upcoming guests and/or dive back into the library of previous Level Up pods to hear some of the most brilliant minds in the space. Experts like founder of Heitner Legal, esports attorney Darren Heitner, regional head of marketing at Evos Esports, Ellen Fang, and CEO of The Ultimate Gamer, Steve Suarez, just to name a few. You can find all these episodes and more on the Ultimate Gamer website, on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your pods. And finally, please like, rate, and review the show. It helps us reach the gaming community to spread the word and share the wisdom of our guests, as well as some of the most thought-provoking stories in the industry. Shout out, as always, to the Ultimate Gamer. I look forward to being with you on the next Level Up podcast.